The marketplace is so used to hearing that Amos preaching and shouting and yelling about their judgment and how God is going to destroy them. And then all of a sudden, he says, but here's the rest of the story. And the rest of the story is that God will someday gather you back together. God will restore the kingdom. God will bring such a peace and such a joy that the seasons, you won't even be able to tell the seasons, winter from summer. Does that sound familiar? Go outside if you don't think it does. There will be, he talks about, in the Amos passage, he talks about how you'll be able to plant and harvest anytime because the seasons will be continuous. He talks about how the grapevines will just overpour and the gardens will be so lush with food and fruit. Israel will be restored to its former glory. And then he has the words, never to be uprooted again. Never to be uprooted again. Did you know what I want us to hear today is that God is always in the business of restoring. God is always about restoration. God is always about bringing people's lives, not just yours or mine, but all people, to bring their lives to a new sense of His presence and His love. It is sin that has broken. It is sin that has corrupted. It was sin on the people's part in Israel, just as it is in our lives when we are out of relationship with God, that brings feelings of despair and dysfunction and hurt and pain. God is in the business of restoration. I want to talk about restoration for just a minute from a very practical sense. The definition of restore, the word restore, the root word, is to bring back to its original condition. To bring it back to its original condition. If you remember, mankind, humanity's original condition was one of paradise. We talk about the creation of Adam and Eve, and they walked in the garden, and everything was beautiful and wonderful, and they fellowshiped not just with themselves, but at night, who visited Adam and Eve? It was God. It says God came to the garden and walked with them, and they were in complete fellowship with God, and that condition was broken by sin. By sin. Let's talk for a minute about the way restoration works. Let's talk about it in a practical sense. How many of you have ever restored something? Get your hands up real high. Be proud. All right? Let's talk about what have you restored? Tell me something. Furniture. Okay, what particular piece? A bedroom set. Okay. Who? Buildings. All right. Whole buildings. Historical buildings. What else? A car. Somebody last service mentioned a 1979 Chevy something or other. What did? Homes. Quilts. All right. Antique trunk. Let me ask, were any of those things easy to do? Restoration is a long and difficult process. It's a hard one. I looked up some of the things online, photos. For instance, nowadays, did you know that they can take a crumpled and folded and a picture that you can't really hardly even see, and they can restore it to its beauty. It was just amazing to look at some of the photos that had been restored. Movies. Our movie industry is always in the process of restoring old movies or colorizing and bringing them back to life. It's fascinating to me. Where's that Rick Crady at? There he is. It's fascinating to me, Rick, to read about the Dillon House. And Rick's company, the Pioneer Group, and he could tell you better about it than me, but they have purchased the Dillon House, which is right across or close to the Capitol building. And it's historical building that was built before World War I. It's one of the few remaining architectural homes in our city that was built before World War I. And they're in the process. Are you finished yet? Next month, they will finish restoring this historical home. And then I was excited to read about the grand piano that was found and brought back and restored. And our own grand piano here. I don't know if you remember or if you were here then, but our own grand piano went out, thanks to Pam DeFries and our music committee, went out and was completely rebuilt and restored. Was that an easy process? Does anybody remember how long our piano was gone? It was over. Yeah, Verlie does. She kept calling. I said, call him again. Call him again. But you know what? It was worth it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful instrument because it has been restored. God is in the business of restoration, not just of inanimate objects, which we know requires a lot of time and talent and a lot of effort. But God is in the business of restoring people, our lives, what goes on around us. Let me just mention, before I get to that part, let me just mention that I looked up scientifically about restoration. And everybody put your arms out there in front of you and look at your arms. Did you know that every 7 days your skin cells regenerate? Every 7 days. You know, I used to blame my cat for all the lint and the dust and everything, but it's really your dead skin cells. I want you to go home and think about that. Don't blame your pets for the dander and all the stuff around there. It's yourself shedding all over there. And I looked up it was Stanford Medical University, their research, and not only do your skin cells regenerate every 7 days, but the cells of your skeleton, your bones, folks, every 7 years regenerate. So if you got bad bones now, just wait 7 years. I'm thinking that you probably have to have your vitamin D and all that calcium and that stuff too. But it's fascinating, the things how God has created us to be self-restoring, self-regenerating. I also read an article that's from June of 2014. It's a very recent research that's going on where they have found linked fasting, the spiritual discipline of fasting, which the Bible talks about from day one, that we are to pray and fast. This Southern California University, the medical team, has linked fasting, 2 to 4 days of fasting, with the regeneration of stem cells. That your body will, when it recognizes that it's starving, will get rid of all of the old diseased immune system cells and regenerate new ones. And they are looking at this as real promise for chemotherapy treatment for patients who need to get rid of those old disease cells and regenerate new ones. Perhaps a promising thing for cancer or other autoimmune systems. Who knew? God knew, didn't he? God knew that fasting was something not even just for spiritual implications, but perhaps even physical implications. Now, don't all go home and stop eating. That's not what I'm saying. There's more medical research. It's one of those commercials like, don't try this at home. But anyway, Amos comes with a message of restoration. And it's the same message that we hear in Revelation. Amos's message is often taken as a messianic prophecy of Jesus and the restoration of his kingdom and what will come. And that's exactly what Revelation is talking about. Revelation is reminding us that this old world, this old creation is corrupted. That sin entered into the world and corrupted it. And someday, God will come and create a new heaven and a new earth. That's one of my favorite passages of Scripture. I actually like to use it a lot at graveside services at committals. There will be a new heaven, a new earth. All things will be new. There will be no more crying, no death, no mourning, no pain. Would you like to get up some morning without pain? Maybe some of you are too young to know what that is yet. No pain, a restoration of all of God's creation. You know, I believe deeply that God is not just restoring someday out there in the future, and that we should all just sit around and say, oh, I'm going to wait till heaven and then I'll be wonderful. But that God is in the business of restoration even today, restoring our lives right now, in this time and in this place. God is in the business of restoration, but we have to want to give ourselves to Him to be restored. He's not just like some fairy godmother or some genie that's just going to zap you and say, okay, you're going to be healed and you're going to be restored and you're going to be... No. We have to participate. We have to be willing. We have to claim the promise. We have to pray and ask God for it. We have to be willing to say, let God be God in my life. And then God can bring restoration. All too often, we want to do it ourselves. We think we're good enough to do it ourselves, and that is probably the worst kind of sin. When we are so prideful, when we are so determined that we can do it ourselves, that we can be our own little God. That was the problem with the people of Amos's day. They were so self-centered. They were so smug in their righteousness that they didn't even know that they needed to be restored. The amazing news, the gospel, is all about the restoration. It is about turning despair into hope, joy, sorrow into joy, anger into peace and calm, and hatred into love. And folks, let me tell you, only God can do those things.